The dying Kethvar warrior had made many poor decisions in her life, but abandoning her offspring on New Brisbane probably ranked somewhere between challenging a plasma dragon to single combat and trusting a Rigelian trader's math. She dragged herself through the settlement's outskirts, leaving a trail of luminescent blue blood that would fascinate the local botanists for decades to come. Her spawn, a pathetic thing barely the size of a human toddler, whimpered behind her. No claws worth mentioning, reflexes slower than a sedated ground sloth. Worst of all, it had shown mercy to a wounded scavenger instead of finishing the kill. The genetic line was clearly corrupted. "Weakness," she hissed in the ancient Kethvar tongue, though the word came out more as a death rattle. "Better to die here than shame the pack." She collapsed near a cluster of prefab housing units, her 4 hearts finally giving up their stubborn rhythm. The spawn nudged her cooling corpse once, then sat down and began that awful keening sound that passed for distress among its kind. That was how Marcus Chen found them 3 hours later. "Well, that's not something you see every day," Marcus muttered, adjusting his field scanner. The readings were definitely non-terrestrial, definitely alive, and definitely not matching any of the usual refugee species. "Elena, you might want to see this." Elena Vasquez emerged from the community center, still wiping flour from her hands. She took one look at the scene and sighed the particular sigh reserved for complicated mornings. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is." "Depends what you think it is." "A baby Kethvar." "Then yes, it's exactly what you think it is." Elena stared at the small creature, which had stopped keening, and was now watching them with large, multifaceted eyes. Each eye was roughly the size of a human fist, and they tracked movement with predatory precision that would have sent most species running. Instead, Elena crouched down and extended her hand. "Hey there, little one. You hungry?" The spawn tilted its head, a gesture that looked almost comically human, despite the distinctly non-human skull structure. Its mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth designed for tearing through dense armor plating. "It's probably scared," Marcus observed. "Also potentially lethal. Also definitely supposed to be reported to Colonial Authority within 6 hours of discovery." "You planning to call them?" Marcus checked his chronometer. "Still got 5 hours and 57 minutes to decide?" By the time the community council convened that evening, word had spread through New Brisbane's 800 residents with the efficiency of small-town gossip networks everywhere. The spawn, temporarily dubbed Kiddo by Elena's 7-year-old daughter, had eaten approximately its own body weight in synthesized protein and taken a 3-hour nap on Elena's couch. "The proper protocols are clear," said Ive. Administrator Webb, consulting his tablet with the dedication of a man desperately clinging to bureaucratic certainty. "Unknown sentient species must be transferred to proper xenological facilities for assessment and potential repatriation." "Repatriation to where?" asked Dr. Patel, the settlement's medical officer. "The mother's dead, and Kethvar don't exactly run daycare centers. Their idea of child rearing involves ritualized combat and survival of the most vicious." Councilmember Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. "So we're talking about sending a baby to get eaten by its own species because that's protocol?" "It's not a baby," Webb protested. "It's a Kethvar juvenile. They're born with full hunting capabilities. This one's probably just delayed." "Delayed in what, exactly?" Elena stood up, cradling the spawn against her shoulder where it was making small, contented rumbling sounds. "Learning to kill efficiently? Because from where I'm standing, that sounds like a feature, not a bug." The spawn chose that moment to reach up with one clawed hand and gently pat Elena's cheek, careful not to pierce the skin. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, Look, said Marcus. We all know what Kethvar are supposed to be. Apex predators. Galactic boogeyman. The reason most species developed faster than light travel in the first place. To run away from them. But this little guy doesn't seem particularly murderous. It's been here 12 hours, Webb pointed out. Give it time. Or, Elena said, maybe different environments produce different results. Maybe being raised by humans instead of hunter-killers might lead somewhere interesting. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. There's precedent for behavioral adaptation in extreme environmental changes, though usually we're talking about laboratory conditions, not whatever this is. This is called parenting, Elena said dryly. Revolutionary concept, I know. The spawn had fallen asleep against Elena's shoulder, its breathing creating small puffs of condensation in the cool evening air. Its claws had retracted completely, and the predatory alertness had faded into something almost vulnerable. The galaxy's most feared species, Rodriguez mused, and it purrs like a cat. Most feared for good reason, Webb insisted. Adult Kethvar can tear through battle armor with their bare hands. They navigate by echolocation and pheromone tracking. Their bone density is triple that of most humanoids, and their reaction time makes professional pilots look sluggish. Sounds useful, Marcus said. Imagine all that capability guided by human values instead of Kethvar instincts. Webb looked appalled. You're talking about weaponizing an infant. I'm talking about giving a kid a chance at a normal life, Elena corrected. Whatever normal means around here. Normal doesn't include raising galactic apex predators as house pets. Good thing we're not treating it like a pet, then. Elena shifted the high form, sleeping spawn, to her other arm. We're treating it like family. The council fell silent. Outside, New Brisbane's twin moons were rising over the agricultural domes, and the night shift was beginning their rounds. Somewhere in the distance, a transport ship's engines hummed as another wave of refugees arrived seeking sanctuary. The paperwork alone would be a nightmare, Dr. Patel said finally. Paperwork's never stopped us before, Rodriguez pointed out. Remember when we declared that Centauri trade dispute a clerical error and ignored it for 3 years? Webb sighed deeply. You realize that if this goes wrong, we could be responsible for unleashing something terrible on the galaxy. Or something wonderful, Elena said. Depends how you look at it. Marcus stood up and walked to the window overlooking the settlement's main square. Below, children from a dozen different species were playing some variant of tag that involved more tentacles than strictly necessary. We've got Rigelian kids learning human mathematics, Centauri refugees picking up local slang, and that family of vegan traders whose kids speak better standard than their parents. Adding one more to the mix doesn't seem unreasonable. Those species aren't genetically programmed killing machines. Neither was this one, apparently, Elena said, looking down at the peacefully sleeping spawn. Something tells me genetics aren't as fixed as we like to think. The vote was closer than it should have been. 4 in favor of keeping the spawn, 3 for following protocol. Webb abstained, muttering something about plausible deniability and early retirement. As the council dispersed, Elena found herself standing alone in the community center with her newest dependent. The spawn stirred slightly, opened one large eye, and made a soft, questioning sound. Don't worry, kiddo, she whispered. We'll figure it out as we go along. Which was, the narrator observed with considerable amusement, exactly the sort of supremely confident ignorance that had gotten humans this far in the first place. They had just voted to raise a creature specifically evolved to hunt down and eliminate threats to galactic stability. This was either going to be the best decision New Brisbane had ever made, or the last decision they'd ever get to make. Time, as always, would tell. 8 years later, the narrator was still waiting to find out which way that particular coin would land. though certain developments were becoming increasingly interesting. "No, no, no," came an exasperated voice from New Brisbane Elementary's playground. "You can't solve disagreements by threatening to disembowel people. We've discussed this." Teacher Morrison stood between two children, a human boy named Tommy clutching a broken toy shuttle, and what appeared to be a normal 8-year-old child if you ignored the chitinous exoskeleton, compound eyes, and the way shadows seemed to bend around its form when it moved too quickly. But he damaged my property, the Kethavar child, who had long since outgrown kiddo in favor of Zeph, protested in perfectly accented standard. Human response protocols require negotiation first, Morrison interrupted. What do we do when someone breaks our things accidentally? Zeph's head tilted in that disconcerting way that had once made Elena nervous, but now just indicated deep concentration. We ask them to replace it or help fix it? Exactly. And if they can't? We problem solve together to find alternatives that satisfy all parties involved. Tommy looked between his teacher and the child, who could theoretically crack his skull like a nut. I can help you build a new one? My dad's got spare parts in his workshop. Zeph's compound eyes shifted through several color phases, a trait that had taken the settlement's children exactly 3 weeks to interpret as emotional states. Current shade. Pleased surprise. That would be acceptable? Your craftsmanship standards are adequate for recreational use. Morrison suppressed a smile. 8 years ago, she'd been terrified of being assigned the galaxy's most dangerous predator as a student. Now her biggest challenge was explaining why Zeph couldn't optimize the other children's homework efficiency by doing it for them overnight. Remember, she called after them as they headed toward the workshop. Tommy sets the pace. Not everyone processes information at Kethavar speeds. Which was, the narrator noted, quite possibly the understatement of the millennium. The real entertainment, however, was happening at Vasquez's family dinner table that same evening. How was school, sweetie? Elena asked, serving Zeph what appeared to be a normal helping of synthesized protein, but was actually precisely calibrated for a metabolism that burned through calories like a fusion reactor. Educational, Zeph replied, using utensils with the delicate precision of someone who had learned not to accidentally shatter dinnerware. Tommy and I completed a collaborative engineering project. I provided design optimization, he contributed aesthetic considerations I had not previously evaluated. Elena's daughter, Lisa, now 15, and completely unimpressed by having a sibling who could bench press a shuttle, rolled her eyes. Translation: Zeph redesigned Tommy's toy to be 40% more aerodynamic, and Tommy told him it looked ugly. Aesthetic appeal serves functional purposes in human social dynamics, Zeph said thoughtfully. This was not covered in traditional Kethavar educational matrices. Because traditional Kethavar education consists of kill or be killed, and the weak deserve their fate, Elena pointed out. We're trying something different here. Marcus, who had become Zeph's unofficial co-parent through sheer proximity and stubbornness, looked up from his tablet. Speaking of different, I got another message from Colonial Authority today. Apparently words, getting around about our unofficial adoption program. What kind of word? Elena's voice had taken on the tone that indicated someone was about to have a very bad day. The kind where certain species are asking questions about why their defective offspring keep ending up in human settlements instead of being properly disposed of. Zeph's utensils stopped moving. Defective? Not you, kiddo, Marcus said quickly. Never you. But apparently we're not the only family doing this. There's a Vorthon youngling on Kepler Station whose parents say he's inappropriately empathetic. 3 hegemony spawns on different core worlds who were abandoned for being insufficiently aggressive. All of them ended up with human families. Lisa leaned forward. Wait, Are we accidentally collecting galactic rejects? We're providing homes for children who don't fit their species' expectations, Elena corrected firmly. There's a difference. A significant one, Zeph agreed. Human social structures accommodate neurodiversity and behavioral variation. Most species optimize for singular survival traits. The family stared at him. What? Zeph asked. I read Dr. Patel's xenopsychology journals. Her research on comparative child development is fascinating. Of course you do, Marcus muttered. Because reading graduate-level research for fun is totally normal 8-year-old behavior. I am not precisely 8 years old by Kethvar maturation standards, Zeph pointed out. I should theoretically have completed my first ritual hunt by now and earned my adult designation. Yeah, well, theoretically, you should also be able to track prey by scent across 3 star systems and communicate through subsonic frequencies, Lisa said. How's that working out? Zeph considered this seriously. My olfactory capabilities are approximately 12% below species average, and my vocal range tops out at frequencies audible to human hearing. However, I have developed compensatory skills in pattern recognition, strategic planning, and collaborative problem-solving that are not typically emphasized in Kethvar development. Elena smiled. In other words, you're different, not defective. The distinction would be lost on most Kethvar, Zeph said matter-of-factly. They measure worth through hunting efficiency and territorial dominance. I measure it through successful integration into cooperative social structures. Marcus set down his tablet. Which brings us to the interesting part of today's message. Apparently, some of Zeph's biological relatives have been asking questions about what happened to their failed family member. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Questions like what? Elena asked. Questions like whether the contamination has been properly contained. Zeph's compound eyes shifted to a color the family had learned to associate with deep, careful thought. They are concerned that exposure to human social dynamics might have created unpredictable variables in Kethvar behavioral patterns. Are they wrong? Lisa asked. Zeph was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice that carried undertones of something that definitely wasn't human, he said, I certainly hope not. The narrator found this particular response absolutely delicious. After 8 years of careful human nurturing, little Zeph had learned cooperation, empathy, and negotiation skills that would serve him well in complex social situations. He had also learned to lie with the smooth confidence of a species that had spent millennia perfecting psychological manipulation. The humans, bless their optimistic hearts, had somehow managed to teach Galactic apex predator how to be even more dangerous by making him better at pretending to be harmless. This was going exactly as well as anyone with functioning pattern recognition might have predicted. Well, Elena said, clearing the dinner plates with the determined cheerfulness of a woman who had made her choices and intended to stick with them. I guess we'll handle that problem when it gets here. If it gets here, Marcus corrected. Zeph helped clear the table, moving with fluid grace that somehow never quite looked natural in domestic settings. Given Kethvar territorial behavior and resource acquisition protocols, he said conversationally, statistical probability suggests a 93% chance of direct contact within the next 6 months. You've been calculating the odds? Lisa asked. I calculate odds for most scenarios, Zeph replied. It helps with strategic planning. The family exchanged glances over his head. Strategic planning for what, exactly? Elena asked. Zeph's eyes shifted to a shade they'd never seen before, something between anticipation and something that might generously be called excitement. For when they come to evaluate the contamination personally. The Kethvar hunting pack arrived on a Tuesday, which the narrator felt was perfectly appropriate timing for an apocalypse. Tuesdays had always been problematic days in human settlements, never quite mundane enough to be ignored, never dramatic enough to warrant proper preparation. They didn't announce themselves with the usual diplomatic channels or territorial broadcasting that most species employed when visiting inhabited worlds. Kethivar simply appeared in New Brisbane's outer sensor grid like digital ghosts made manifest, their ship's stealth capabilities making human detection systems look like children's toys. The first sign of trouble was Zeph. "They are here," he announced at breakfast, setting down his nutrition cube with mechanical precision. His compound eyes had shifted to a color none of the family had seen before. Deep violet shot through with silver threads that seemed to move independently. Elena froze mid-bite. "They." "My birth pack. 3 hunters, 1 tracker, 1 designated executor. Standard retrieval formation for contaminated assets." Zeph's voice carried no emotion whatsoever, which was somehow more terrifying than panic would have been. Marcus dropped his coffee. "How do you know that?" "Pheromone signatures in the atmospheric processors changed approximately 17 minutes ago. Subsonic communication frequencies began broadcasting in High Kethivar. Also, the settlement's perimeter wildlife has gone completely silent." Zeph tilted his head toward the window. "Listen." The family strained their ears. Nothing. Not even the usual morning chatter of indigenous bird analogs. "Shit," Lisa whispered, which earned her a reflexive glare from Elena that died halfway to completion. "Language is the least of our problems right now," Elena muttered, reaching for her communicator. "Marcus, get Dr. Patel and Webb. Tell them we have a Code 7 situation." "We don't have a Code 7, Marcus pointed out. "We do now." Zeph stood up, and for the first time in 8 years, his movement didn't look even remotely human. It was fluid, predatory, and carried the focused intensity of something that had just switched from prey mode to hunter mode. "They will attempt negotiation first. Kethivar protocol requires offering the contaminated individual an opportunity to prove their worth before elimination." "Prove their worth how?" Lisa demanded. "Combat trial. Single engagement against the pack's youngest member. Victory restores honor. Defeat confirms contamination requires cleansing." Elena grabbed Zeph's shoulders, forcing him to look at her. "We are not letting you fight anyone." "You may not have a choice," Zeph replied. "Kethivar territorial law supersedes human jurisdiction in matters of genetic integrity." "Says who?" "Says the Treaty of Vegan Prime, subsection 12, paragraph 4. Species-specific disciplinary actions regarding biological contamination fall under original species authority, regardless of current territorial claims." Zeph's voice had taken on the flat, recitative tone of someone quoting legal documents from memory. "I researched applicable interstellar law years ago." The family stared at him. "You've been planning for this," Marcus said slowly. "I have been preparing for multiple probable scenarios," Zeph corrected. "This was always the most likely outcome." Before anyone could respond, the settlement's emergency communication system crackled to life. Webb's voice, tight with controlled panic, filled the kitchen. "All residents remain indoors. We have visitors. Repeat, all residents remain indoors until further notice." Through the window, they could see figures moving between the buildings with impossible grace. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking them for anything human. They were too tall, too angular, and they moved with the coordinated precision of pack hunters who had worked together for decades. 5 of them, Zeph observed quietly. More than standard retrieval protocol suggests. Either they consider the contamination more severe than anticipated, or they expect resistance. "Are they going to get resistance?" Elena asked. Zeph was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice that somehow managed to sound both 8 years old and absolutely ancient, he said. That depends on whether you trust me. The front door chimed. Not knocked, not pounded. Chimed, with the sort of polite electronic notification that suggested someone had simply walked up and pressed the door's visitor alert, like they were delivering packages. Marcus moved toward the door, but Zeph stepped in front of him with fluid speed that left afterimages. I will handle initial contact. Human social protocols may be misinterpreted as aggression. He walked to the door and activated the external speaker. When he spoke, it was in a language that sounded like grinding metal mixed with subsonic harmonics that made the family's bones ache. The response came in the same language, harsh, rapid, and somehow conveying menace even through the translation barrier. Zeph switched back to standard. Pack leader requests formal audience with contamination source. I am instructed to present myself for evaluation. Tell them we're busy, Lisa said desperately. I am instructed to inform you that Kethavar do not recognize human scheduling conflicts as valid territorial claims, Zeph replied, without turning around. To the door, he spoke again in his birth language. The response was shorter this time. Sharper. They have requested that human guardians be present for evaluation proceedings. This is unusual. Typically, contaminated individuals face judgment alone. Elena stood up straighter. Why do they want us there? Unknown. Kethavar do not traditionally concern themselves with the opinions of prey species. Zeph paused. Unless they have developed concerns about the nature of the contamination itself? Marcus and Elena exchanged looks over Zeph's head. 8 years of parenting had taught them to communicate in glances, and this glance said, "We're about to find out what we've actually raised." "All right," Elena said. "Let them in." Zeph opened the door. The Kethavar who entered moved like liquid death poured into roughly humanoid shapes. The pack leader was nearly 3 meters tall, with natural armor plating that looked like it could deflect starship hull cutters. Her companions flanked her with military precision, and their compound eyes swept the room with the systematic thoroughness of security scanners. They were, the narrator observed, absolutely magnificent examples of evolutionary optimization for violence. They were also clearly disturbed by what they found. "This is the contamination source?" the pack leader asked in heavily accented but understandable standard. Her gaze fixed on Elena with the intensity of a targeting system. "This is my family," Zeph replied, before Elena could speak. "They provided care and education during my maturation phase." "Your maturation phase should have concluded 6 cycles ago with your first kill and territorial claim. Instead, you exist in symbiosis with prey animals." The pack leader's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty in her own superiority. "Explain this aberration." Zeph moved to stand between his family and the hunters. It was a subtle repositioning, but everyone in the room noticed it. "I adapted to available environmental conditions. Cooperation and resource sharing proved more effective than territorial competition in this context. Cooperation with prey species is not adaptation. It is degeneracy." "Is it?" Zeph asked. His voice carried a tone that Elena had never heard before, something that managed to be perfectly polite and absolutely deadly at the same time. "Would you like me to demonstrate the effectiveness of hybrid tactical approaches?" The pack leader's companions shifted slightly, hands moving closer to weapons that probably violated several interstellar treaties. "You challenge pack authority?" the leader asked. "I offer educational demonstration," Zeph corrected. "Human pedagogical methods emphasize experiential learning. Perhaps you would benefit from practical experience with cooperative combat techniques before dismissing their effectiveness." Elena realized, with the crystalline clarity that comes with absolute terror, that her adopted son was politely offering to fight 5 adult Kethavar hunters simultaneously. and from the way his stance had shifted into something that looked nothing like the child who helped clear dinner dishes, he was serious about it. "Very well," the pack leader said. "Demonstrate your contaminated approach. We will determine its value." Which was exactly the moment when New Brisbane's human residents discovered that their quiet, polite, slightly awkward adopted alien had been spending 8 years learning how to weaponize everything they'd taught him about teamwork, strategic thinking, and creative problem-solving. The narrator settled back to enjoy the show. This was going to be educational indeed. What happened next would have been impossible to predict, which was precisely why it worked so perfectly. Zeph didn't attack. Instead, he sat down cross-legged on the kitchen floor and began speaking in rapid, fluid Kethvar while gesturing toward his family. The pack leader's compound eyes shifted through several color phases that suggested confusion, then growing alarm. "What is he saying?" Elena whispered to Marcus. "No idea, but they look like they're having some kind of existential crisis." The youngest pack member, barely larger than Zeph himself, suddenly stepped backward and made a sound that was either laughter or the Kethvar equivalent of a nervous breakdown. The pack leader silenced him with a sharp gesture, but her own posture had shifted from predatory confidence to something approaching wariness. Zeph switched back to standard. "I have explained the tactical advantages of human psychological warfare techniques, specifically how empathy can be weaponized for intelligence, gathering, how cooperation multiplies individual capabilities beyond linear projections, and how strategic deception becomes more effective when your opponents underestimate your capacity for violence." The pack leader made a sound like grinding stone. "You threaten us with feelings?" "I am explaining why you have already lost this engagement," Zeph replied calmly. "You entered human territory assuming contamination had weakened me. You brought a 5-member pack to retrieve one allegedly defective youngling. You announced your presence to the entire settlement, and you requested an audience with my family. Standard retrieval protocols are designed for encounters with isolated, weakened targets who have been separated from pack support." Zeph stood up, and his movement somehow managed to look both completely relaxed and absolutely lethal. "You are not facing an isolated target." Marcus felt his communicator vibrate, then Elena's, then Lisa's. All around the settlement, every human resident was receiving the same message. Zeph had sent detailed tactical assessments of each pack member, their individual strengths, weaknesses, preferred attack patterns, and optimal counter strategies to every adult in New Brisbane. "You see," Zeph continued conversationally, "human social structures are designed around information sharing and collaborative response to threats. While you were announcing your presence, I was coordinating defensive positions with 47 armed residents, 3 improvised weapons manufacturing teams, and the settlement's automated defense grid." The pack leader's eyes had gone completely black, a color that meant either rage or recognition of a superior tactical position. "Furthermore," Zeph added, "I have spent 8 years studying human conflict resolution techniques. Would you like to know what I learned?" "Speak." Humans do not merely defeat enemies, they convert them. They integrate useful opponents into their own social structures, extracting maximum value from captured resources while simultaneously removing threats from the operational environment. Zeph's smile was pure predator, refined through 8 years of human diplomatic training. In short, they turn enemies into assets. The youngest pack member made that nervous sound again. The pack leader's claws had extended automatically, a reflexive response to recognizing a superior threat. "You propose alliance?" she asked. "I propose evolution," Zeph replied. "There are currently 17 Kethvar younglings in human settlements across 14 worlds, all abandoned for traits their birth packs considered defective, all receiving human education, all developing capabilities that combine our species' natural advantages with human strategic thinking. Elena felt her blood turn to ice water. 17? The number increases monthly, Zeph said, without taking his eyes off the pack leader. Humans have an unfortunate tendency to adopt anything that appears vulnerable, regardless of its potential for violence. They are creating an entire generation of hybrid-educated apex predators. The pack leader's breathing had changed to something that sounded like a fusion engine cycling up for emergency power. This is not contamination. This is systemic modification of genetic behavioral patterns. Correct, and it appears to be spreading. Zeph tilted his head with that familiar gesture that now looked deeply unsettling when combined with his predatory focus. 3 Vorthan communities have reported similar adoption patterns. The hegemony is investigating disappearances of their defective spawn. Even the Rigelians are asking questions about their offspring who demonstrate excessive creativity. Marcus sat down heavily. We're not just raising refugee kids. We're accidentally creating some kind of galactic super soldiers. The term super soldiers implies intentional military application, Zeph corrected. This is more accurately described as species optimization through environmental adaptation. Humans are not deliberately creating weapons. They are simply treating potentially valuable individuals as family members regardless of their biological origins. And that's somehow worse? Lisa asked. Much worse, the pack leader said quietly. Intentional weapons development can be detected and countered. Accidental evolution cannot be stopped because it appears to be beneficial to all parties involved. She turned to Elena. Your species does not understand what you have done. Enlighten me, Elena said dryly. You have created perfect infiltrators. Individuals with full species capabilities who think like humans, plan like humans, and integrate seamlessly into human social structures. When they return to their birth species territories, they will carry human tactical approaches into environments where no one will suspect contamination because they appear to be standard biological specimens. The room fell silent. Oh, Marcus said finally. Oh, that's really bad, isn't it? Or really good, Zeph said thoughtfully. Depending on your perspective regarding galactic power distribution and the future of interspecies relations. The pack leader was now studying Zeph with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that might determine her species' survival. You orchestrated this entire encounter. I calculated probable outcomes and prepared appropriate responses, Zeph admitted, including contingency plans for 17 different engagement scenarios, 3 extraction protocols, and 1 diplomatic conversion approach. Diplomatic conversion? Zeph's smile became absolutely terrifying. Would your pack be interested in experiencing human educational methodologies firsthand? New Brisbane has excellent adult learning programs. Which was when Elena finally understood what 8 years of human nurturing had actually produced. They hadn't raised a child. They had created a recruitment officer, one who had just offered to teach 5 adult Kethavar hunters how to think like humans while retaining all their natural advantages as apex predators. The pack leader considered this for a long moment. Then, in a voice that carried undertones of something that might generously be called amusement, she said, Your adoption program. Does it have space for mature students? 3 hours later, the narrator observed the 5 most dangerous hunters in known space sitting around Elena's kitchen table while she explained the basics of human conflict resolution theory, and Dr. Patel provided crash courses in interspecies psychology. Zeph helped serve snacks. The galaxy, the narrator reflected, was about to become a very different place. Because humans, in their infinite capacity for treating the impossible as merely improbable, had accidentally discovered how to optimize apex predators for diplomatic integration. They had created the most effective infiltration program in galactic history, staffed it with abandoned alien children, and called it family. The universe's most feared species were about to learn cooperation, empathy, and strategic thinking from the universe's most persistently social species. This was either the dawn of a new age of interstellar harmony or the beginning of the most sophisticated conquest program ever devised. Time, as always, would tell. But given humanity's track record for accidentally solving problems by treating them as opportunities for friendship, the narrator was cautiously optimistic about which way that particular coin would land.